Hello and welcome to Global Lens with me, Parikshit Luthra. We're reporting from Qatar. India and Qatar have over 50 years of diplomatic relations. There are over 850,000 people of Indian origin living and working here in Qatar. There are also 45,000 Indian students here. Both countries have a trade partnership of roughly $14 billion annually. 40% of India's LNG needs are met from imports from Qatar itself. Both countries are now looking to deepen the trade and investment partnership. After UAE, India is looking to ink an FTA with Qatar itself. And that's why Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is here to speed up negotiations on the trade deal with Qatar and also look at more avenues for exports and investments between the two countries. First, take a look at some of the highlights of the visit.
We should quickly launch FTA negotiations. We are discussing the contours of the terms of reference, and once we have finalized that, Honorable Minister of Qatar and I have discussed that we will fast track it so that trade and business can double by 2030.
Union Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal held talks with his counterpart, Sheikh Faisal bin Thani. At the same time, there were leading businessmen from both sides who were part of the delegation-level talks. We caught up with Adeeb, the managing director of Lulu Financial Holdings, on their long-term bet on India and why India should actually aim to have an FTA with not just UAE and Qatar, but each Gulf nation. With us right now is the Managing Director of Lulu Financial Holdings, Mr. Adeeb Ahamed. Adeeb Ahamed, thank you so much for being with us here on CNBC-TV18 in Doha. So there is a lot of push for having an FTA done between India and Qatar as soon as possible. What do you think are the prospects and why should we get it done as soon as possible?
I think so. Qatar is becoming a very relevant market, and if you look at the entire perspective of the Indian and Qatari relationship, Qatar is the largest supplier of LNG into India, where Qatar takes around 26% of the India's need on the LNG side. On the contrary, India has been looking at avenues where they start inviting Qatar to invest into the Indian ecosystem of growth, which is very important and relevant towards Indian context of manufacturing at this point of time, on AI innovation, in healthcare, agri-tech, and many such industrial aspects, So for us, it's very important that we summarize these FTA agreements, makes improvement to our existing relationship in terms of free trade agreement, also in terms of double taxation treaty. These have been the major ask by the Qatari counter side as well. I think so there's been documents that has been worked outside, further lines has been polished as well. And I'm sure that, in an aspect, time is of essence. We need to make sure that, we get this FTI done at the earliest. It gives much more comfort to the Qatari counterparts and, their vision into investment. If you really take a little bit step behind, the relationship between India and Qatar has been a 500 years old relationship. Has the relationship really matured where Qatar has really invested to India's story? Not so much as of today.
Right.
So I think so there's more bridge that needs to be created. There's a large diaspora bridge, which is a living example of both the cultural as well as trade relationship. There is around 850,000 odd Indian diaspora that is living here in Qatar.
Absolutely.
So that bridge is already established, but we need further bridges to be built.
What I would like to ask you, the trade is in the range of 12 to 14 billion US dollars. 14 if we speak about FY25.
Yes.
Skewed largely in favor of Qatar because of LNG exports, and we only export somewhere around $1.7 billion into Qatar. How do we bridge this trade deficit? How can India end up increasing exports to Qatar? What are the avenues for doing so, according to you?
So we need to be realistic on the Qatar market. It's sizably a very small market. with a large investment deep pockets. The major Indian companies like L&T, like Tata, they've all invested majoritively into Qatar's growth story. So if you really look at FIFA, L&T was responsible for building a couple of stadiums here. They were majorly part in building the metro infrastructure here in the country. So for the sizable investment that is there inside as a domestic market, India has played its part. We need to now look at prospects where India and Qatar together could address the world problems together in terms of new age technology, in terms of food security, in terms of manufacturing, steel, renewables. I think so the hydrogen story of India could be well spoken through a Qatari angle. So I think so that partnership needs to be built at this point of time, where together we would become a force on world investments.
What do you think would actually unleash investments from Qatar into India? The pace of FDI also in the last 24 years has been slow. The Qatari Amir has promised $10 billion investments in the next few years, but what can speed that up?
So I think so far there's only been a 1.6 or a 1.8 billion odd investment that has flown into India, predominantly on large companies, so Viacom, Reliance Retail, Shriram Finance. These were the major companies that has been invested by QIA in India. I think so the possibility of investment is large. I think so we've not been able to sell our story in a much more angle towards the Qatari counterparts. And I think so this kind of dialogues that what we are having because of the India-Qatar task force in terms of investment on both the chambers, and of course with the Ministry of Commerce and Minister being here today, he's trying to push that story more strongly to the Qatar counterparts. They're looking at possible avenues where they understand. Energy and trade is an area that Qatar understands extremely well. Natural resource, where we are also expanding our natural reserves mining in an aspect. It's been an area that Qatar has shown interest inside. Tourism is a huge aspect that we can really get them to speak about. Qatar worldwide has invested into many large-scale tourism projects. We've been able to showcase a couple of projects in India that we hope that they will take into consideration. I think so. AI is of a core importance today. Recently we had almost 30 odd unicorns of India being presented during the Web Summit here in Qatar. I think so it was a good platform to showcase what India could do and really get the interest of Qatari counterparts to come and see that India's stories on building the next set of AI technology through the GPUs. The need of data centers in India is also fastly expanding. The semiconductor stories of India is also very strong. So these are areas that we are looking to get them to start investing in India. 10 billion is also a very small number. I think so together, if we can start the momentum today, we could see that number doubling or tripling over the next couple of years.
Will just India-UAE CEPA and maybe an India-Qatar CEPA, if it happens this year, will that be enough? Or do we need a larger FTA with the GCC?
I think a larger FTA with GCC would be beneficial for both the sides. How practical it is in the real term is time to say, because GCC is not like a European Union structure as such. Every country has their own priorities, so it's very important that it is understood. It's a cultural aspect as well. So at this point of time, getting a CEPA signed with each of the countries seems to be a possibility. And I think so moving forward, a larger FTA with GCC would be a reality.
Right. Coming to Lulu Financial Holdings, what could actually urge you to invest more in India? If I were to ask you about your plans to increase your footprint in India as part of your global diversification strategy, what's the plan for the next few years?
See, at Lulu Financial Holdings, we say this everywhere where we go. Remittance is the most desirable foreign capital that any developing country can look into. If you look at the numbers of last year, 24-25, we would say that there is 900 billion of remittance that has flown around the world. At Lulu Financial Holdings, our rails were able to catch 19.6 billion. That means that the world remittance numbers we control around 2%, largely invested into India, subcontinent, and the Asia Pacific in Philippines, Indonesia, and countries like those. We see that there is a large more, and studies have proved that 25% of the global remittance is used in healthcare, education, and SME. I think so. These are the core aspect of any country's backbone. I think so. This capital is most desirable because it comes into the country and never leaves the country.
Correct.
It is used to create more wealth. It is used to create more jobs in the country. And I think so at Lulu Financial Holdings, we find India to be at the center of every good story that we are building today. We've already invested into a micro-lending SME platform into India. We're looking into a couple of new fintechs that we'll be co-investing in Indian platform as well. I think so the Indian story when it comes to development of new AI technologies is great. There's a lot of technologies that we feel that we could invest in and take from India to the rest of the world.
Right.
So I think so we're very bullish and positive about the story, and we're looking to co-write the story with India's growth aspect happening in the next 5 to 10 years.
Any capital outlay that you've put aside for India for the next 2-3 years?
I think we've collectively in India invested close to 500 crores. In our micro-lending business and our 82 business. We're looking to actually take it up to around 700 crores over the next 5 years.
Finally, one pain point that you feel that the Indian government must work on, GST reform has been done.
Yes.
What could be the next big reform which you feel could really unleash the animal spirits and also unleash investments from both global and domestic investors?
I think repatriation of startup capitals, so it's been also an ask, in terms of taxation. When it comes inside, it's not the most desirable and easiest form of getting capital inside. I think so. This is something that in the startup ecosystem, why a lot of people move to Singapore and other territories. I think if a little bit more focus has been put on that one, on easy investment and repatriation of startup capital, and I think so it could further enhance the startup ecosystem in the market.
All right, Mr. Ahmed Adeeb, thank you so much for joining us here in Qatar, giving us your view on the India story and what India should do in terms of broadening its trade basket with Qatar and the larger Gulf area as well.
Thank you very much.
Clearly, India wants to seek greater investments from Qatar and with a higher speed as well. At the same time, we want to increase our export basket, make sure that exports of pharmaceuticals, engineering products, gems and jewelry, copper articles increase from India through Qatar as well. On that note, we take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we'll put our focus on Qatar as the center of Middle East diplomacy. A country which has been holding talks to negotiate a settlement between Israel and the Hamas as well. That's coming up on the other side. Welcome back to a special edition of Global Lens from Qatar. Qatar as a country has been the center of Middle East diplomacy. It is here where for the last 2 years there have been negotiations to end the war between Israel and Hamas. The US, Western powers have all been a part of negotiations. Very recently, Israel had also carried out strikes on a Hamas target here in Qatar. There was anger over the killing of a Qatari citizen. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel also apologized to Qatar for that strike. How will that incident change the security dynamics in the Middle East? What is Qatar's hope from the Gaza plan in the next few weeks? I caught up with Abel Abdel Gafar, the Director of Foreign Policy at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs right here in Qatar. Listen in. Thank you very much, Adil, for joining us. Let me begin by asking you, Israel and the Israeli Prime Minister have apologized to the Prime Minister of Qatar for the strike against Hamas here, which killed a Qatari citizen. How does Qatar see the apology, and how does this really change how Qatar views Middle East security and also Israel for that matter?
I think the apology was welcomed because this was an unprovoked attack on a country that is working on very hard to mediate the conflict and the horrible genocide that is happening right now in Gaza. And actually, the mediators, the Hamas mediators that were here with approval and the knowledge of the US and Israel. So that's why the attack came as a big surprise. And also, one Qatari citizen died in such a attack. So I think the apology was very welcome, but it has to be followed by concrete steps from the Israeli side to de-escalate the conflict in Gaza. And not only in Gaza, but also Israel has been engaged in attacking Yemen, Syria, Lebanon as well. So things we want to move towards de-escalating all of the regional issues.
Considering that for the last 24 months, Qatar was trying to mediate some sort of settlement between Israel and Hamas and end the war, and then a strike took place on Qatari soil. Will this now create a strong mistrust for the future between Qatar and Israel, and even Qatar and US for that matter?
I think this trust can be rebuilt, and it's not just only here in Qatar, but also the Israelis have attacked the negotiating team that was negotiating for Iran, between the US and Iran, and attacked Iran during this negotiation. This highlights really how the Israelis have trying to torpedo some of these peace initiatives that are happening across the region. But right now we have President Trump pushing for the ceasefire and an end to the conflict in Gaza, and this is happening right now. Currently the negotiators are in Cairo trying to hash out a deal, and potentially by the end of this week we may have this end of this horrific 2-year conflict in Gaza.
So Israel continues to strike Gaza. According to reports, more than 20 people have been killed. What's your view on how the Gaza plan can be implemented? Can it even be successful in the current circumstances?
Well, I think the plan is not perfect because right now it just ends the conflict, and there's no the next plans, the next steps are not really taken into consideration, especially the international force that's going to look after Gaza, the amount of humanitarian aid. But at the same time, we want to end this genocide that is happening right now. So an imperfect plan is better than no plan. But we don't want to go to the occupation that we had before October 7th and so on. We want to find a long-term solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that is durable and sustainable.
Right. What do you think this attack by Israel does to regional security, and now what is Qatar likely to do in order to perhaps defend itself in the future?
Well, I think when it comes to Qatar and the GCC at wide, there are 3 specific approaches that each country has done. The first approach is to seek deeper security guarantees from the US. And we've seen that come out from the recent statement by the White House on Qatar. That's going to be closer defense cooperation coming from that side. The second thing is also diversifying their security guarantees and security architecture. So we've seen also in that regard the Saudis seek this defense pact with the Pakistanis as well. So countries are going to be increasingly diversifying their security posture. And finally, there's going to be an increased push to cooperate between the GCC countries. So we've seen the summit that has happened here in Doha. And after that summit, the defense ministers from the Gulf Cooperation Councils have signaled that there will be closer cooperation between the defense ministries and the defense establishment of all of the 6 GCC countries. Of course, such cooperation already happened within the US security umbrella and the CENTCOM presence in the Gulf. But I think what we will see in the coming period, increased cooperation outside of that CENTCOM and US umbrella between the 6 GCC countries.
Do you expect a NATO-style pact between Arab nations to protect themselves?
Well, this Arab NATO has been spoken about for years. I don't see it really happening because each country has its own security threat perception, security posture. But I see within the GCC that there could be increased cooperation, and perhaps Egypt and Jordan can contribute as well. But because simply all of these Arab states have different perceptions of security, different political alliances and so on, so I don't see an Arab NATO per se happen. But I see definitely increased GCC cooperation on defense and further investments in the Peninsula Shield, which is the GCC Defense Force.
Right. The Saudi-Pakistan pact, do you get a sense that more countries in the Gulf could sign such pacts with Pakistan, considering it is a nuclear-capable nation? It has a trained military. Do you think Pakistan could emerge as a net security provider?
I don't think GCC-wide, because Pakistan has, of course, its own domestic challenges, has its own issues, its own region. And I think the Saudi-Pakistan deal has to be understood within the context of the historical relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And actually, many Pakistani soldiers were involved in the war in Yemen as part of the GCC force there. So I don't see this becoming a GCC-wide. It really relates to the particulars of the Saudi-Pakistani relationship.
Right. Do you also feel that the Israel-Hamas war over the last 2 years has disrupted the security architecture in the Middle East?
Yeah, 100%, because lots of the countries, there's been, after the end of the Gulf crisis between the GCC states and Egypt and Turkey and others, there's been a bit of a detente and a return to normalcy. And I think what has happened since the beginning of this genocide has really upended all of that. We've seen the conflict extend to Lebanon, to Syria, to Yemen, to Iraq, to elsewhere. So there's a huge instability happening in the region now that we would like to de-escalate. And the de-escalation starts from the Israeli side. You know, if you recall, there was the Abraham Accords a few years ago that sought to re-normalize relationships between Arab states and Israel. All of this has been on hold now, and further expansion of the Abraham Accords is on hold pending the end of this ongoing genocide in Gaza.
Right. Now, when it comes to this week in Middle East diplomacy, what do you think will it take for this war to actually stop? Do you expect the Hamas to release all the prisoners, the war to come to some sort of end this week?
Well, one can only be hopeful, and the negotiations are happening today in Cairo. But I think from the statements of Hamas that we've seen on the media, they have indicated that they will release the hostages, that they do not want to retain control of Gaza. But there are some sticking points, because the U.S. plan proposed an international sort of oversight committee and the involvement of Tony Blair, who does not have a very good reputation here in the Middle East. So what Hamas have said is that they want to hand over the governance of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority. And I think there's a wide alignment on this from all of the Arab and Muslim countries, that power and governance of Gaza is handed to the Palestinians, not to Tony Blair and his colleagues.
Right. Finally, why do you think Israel continues to strike Gaza when we're entering such a crucial week in trying to end the war?
I think we have to reflect on the domestic politics of Israel, because many in the right-wing coalition of Prime Minister Netanyahu do not want to have this deal. They actually, if left to their own devices, they want to push out Gazans out of Gaza. They want to overtake the West Bank and so on. So I think Netanyahu is giving a bit of free rein for his right wing to highlight how they're engaged in conflict until the last minute, because he has to sell this ceasefire also to his domestic constituency, because his coalition may break. And if his coalition breaks, he may be out of power, and if he's out of power, he's legally liable for a number of corruption cases and so on. So I think the domestic lens really impacts the international, the regional and international picture here.
Right. Now, finally, Qatar and most Gulf nations have very close trading partnerships with China. How do you see the Qatar-India relationship right now, both in the context of trade, when we're trying to negotiate a trade agreement, and secondly, in the context of security, when the security architecture among GCC countries is changing rapidly?
I think the relationship has been very strong. India is increasingly a major partner for all of the GCC states. Of course, India's strongest relationship in the GCC is with the UAE, but increasingly has been deepening its engagement. So I think that it's very promising. Of course, there's a bit of a trade imbalance given the LNG imports to India, but I think increasingly I'm seeing more Indian cars on the road, more Indian products and so on. And I think it's only uphill from there. Having said that, in the same time, I think there's some disappointment that has come from the region, from India, especially since the beginning of the war in Gaza. We have a historical perception of India, a very passionate one about the role of India during the non-alignment movement. Myself, as an Egyptian, always have very fond memories of the Bandung Conference and so on. And I think under the current government in India, which has arguably taken a bit of a more Israeli response, this has had an impact on India's reputation, maybe not at the government level, because still the business is good, the political relationships are very good, but maybe at a people-to-people level where it may have been affected. Not all is lost. People still are very fond of India at the leadership level, at the people level, and I think hopefully at the end of this conflict, we see the resumption of this people-to-people ties.
Be it energy ties or diplomacy in times of conflict, Qatar is an extremely important partnership for India. Whether we will be able to strike an FTA with Qatar in the next few months, that remains to be seen. With video journalist Balbir from Doha, this is Parikshit Luthra.